Why are we designed to live so long if we break so early?
Yeah, so developing in an indie schedule is a lot of balancing commitments. A lot of game developers you might hear from are doing this full time. I am not. I have a job. It's not this. I wake up in the morning at stupid o'clock and I go to my day job and I do a 12-hour shift there, come home, and then I do a few more hours on the game. When I get a weekend, I work on the game. And so this basically means that I've got to be really careful. If I waste 3 weeks of my development time trying to chase up one perfectionist thing, sometimes near enough is good enough, but also you've got to really balance what's important to the player and what's going to bring the player the most benefit for the amount of time you can give it. This is my first game that I am pushing out as a lead developer, but it's not the first game I've ever worked on. I've found a lot of people that go into making games are pretty introverted, but also they're forced to not be. And that is true of myself as well. When I started working on games, it was through a university context, and you were forced basically into these group work assignments with people you didn't really like. Classic. I found that it was actually really helpful for prepping me for what the industry expects of you as you get into it further, because you will basically never be working alone. Even on a game with a scope as small as this, if you take a look at the credits, it's like 12 people deep. Even if I did 90% of the work on the game, other people still contributed. I run into a programming issue and I poke the poor sop that befriended me that's a programmer and, get their help. Lots of people go into making a game no matter how big or small it is. The true solo developer myth is very rare to see in reality. I found with the development of this game that I really wanted to make sure when I was working on it that other people could jump in and out, and that I was also approaching this from a standpoint of something that could be commercially viable. It's all good and well to make a game for art, and I've certainly done that before. I've probably worked on about 12 or 15 games before, none of them commercially published. Sometimes they go on itch. It's one of those situations where I wanted to approach this from the perspective that if the right things came into place, this could make some money. And so when I approached this game, I did pre-production. A lot of indies don't really do the proper pre-production for commercial development, which can come to bite them in the arse later. I approached it from looking at competitor titles, and I identified key things that people like out of hidden object games and key things they don't. And I spent quite a lot of time pulling together lots of references and mood boards and things like that. I mean, I say lots of time, it was about a week. A week is all you really need in a scale of this sort of game to give yourself a good, solid foundation to work off of. If you don't understand what people like out of a game like this, you are not going to make a game that people like. It basically means that I have had help from lots and lots of people around me. They've helped me with lots of different problems. It is interesting almost managing people in a sort of situation where you're all friends and they're helping you out with stuff, but it's not too formal. They're not my employees, they're my friends. How do you keep people to a time schedule when that happens? And how do you make sure that things actually get delivered in a way that you've asked for? Sometimes it means taking your hands off the reins, stop being such a perfectionist about it. Art is collaboration, and collaboration means compromise. But sometimes things are important to get right. I've often found working with the right people is the first step in there. The right people aren't going to fight you on the wrong problems. Also, it's about understanding somebody's expertise and also their time commitments and where they're coming from. Probably the key thing around that is programming. Programming isn't really my strength, and so I had quite a bit of help when it came to the more technical elements in the game, like options menus and saving systems and controller support. Those sorts of things that require a lot of technical expertise, I got my programmer friends to help with. One of the friends that helped me with a lot of the programming is also a contractor for programming in lots of other things, and he's just so short on time. If I had approached him to help me with this with the expectation that he'd sit down and help me as a full-time developer with no pay, it would have been a very sour relationship after this point.
Being a very small team where it's mostly just me and a bit of help from the other people around me, I had to make sure the game wasn't too big for the time I could give it. So setting the right expectations with somebody when you approach them is important. It means saying something like, hey, can I get you to help me with this one system? I need to have it in by this date. Does that sound reasonable to you?
And if he'd said, no, I don't have enough time, or that's larger than that time, or I just can't commit to this, I'd go, that's all good. At the end of the day, compromise isn't just getting what you need. It's making sure that you come out of making this game with your friendships intact. No one game is worth the friends that you've had for years. I mean, working on the business side of indie games is interesting. It's a lot easier when you have time. Business takes time, and depending on how deep you get into it, if I was trying to search out a publisher or look into alternate funding routes and do lots of grant applications and really go deep into the business side of games, that would be a full-time job, or more than a full-time job in its own right, and it is for a lot of people. I think for me, where my primary focus has been on designing a game rather than making a business venture, I have mostly had to interact with the platform, Steam. I've had to make sure things are set up in a way that they're happy with it, and make sure that the obligations I have in running a business in Australia are satisfied, which I'm quite lucky aren't that high. Steam is actually really lovely. I mean, a lot of people bag on Steam because they take 30%, but quite frankly, so does everyone else. So, I think Steam's doing a lot more than the other people taking their 30%, in my opinion. They've always been really good to work with. I've never come away from an interaction with a Steam employee where I thought to myself, oh, they were really mean to me or selfish or didn't care or whatever. They all seem like deeply passionate people that care a lot about the games that they platform. It's just really lovely to work with people that have a real passion and enthusiasm for the work that they do. And that's just game development in general, I think. Everyone you work with in game development, be they a platform holder or a console person, or the people that you hire to work in a team, like contractors and, co-creators and things like that, everyone is they love what they do. And if you don't love what you do in games, quite frankly, move to a different industry, because you're not making money in games like you could make in other industries. Games are meant to be creators of fun, but they're also meant to be creators of diverse perspectives, and they're meant to be ways to push people into understanding things that they maybe don't have life experience with. The business side of that basically just enables me to go out and create things that people can actually play, rather than just making stuff that then sits in a hard drive on my computer for years. What was the hardest part about making this game in 6 months? Well, originally I intended to make it in 3, so I'm already double my time intended. But at the end of the day, it was time. It was trying to find the time in the day to work on it consistently, and especially with starting a new job. In December, I started a new full-time job, and that meant that the time that I'd previously had to work on it was now cut in half. I found myself really having to push myself to keep the momentum up, and, after I get home from a long day of work, being able to eat some dinner, spend some time with my partner, and then sit down and keep working on it. And that can be really tough to maintain that momentum. There's certainly times where I needed a break and would spend a few days not working on it, but that just meant that when I came back to working on it, it felt more regenerative than exhausting. This is more of a fun hobby than a, business commitment. And so it meant that I could really enjoy the process of creating for what it was rather than what it should be. When I started working on this game, it was September of last year. I was due to be married in 3 weeks. Perfect time to start a big creative project. It's an interesting position to be in as well, because you spend a lot of time on a games project, so you've got to be sure it's the thing you want to work on. I had just spent 8 months working on something totally different. It was like a survival game, a bit Don't Starve, a bit cozy, sort of Australiana outback type situation. It was a really cool idea, but the scope of it was just too big. And so having just worked on something for 8 months, I then had to throw all of that out and start on something totally different. I really wanted to make sure when I started working on this game, the scope wasn't going to be too big. I actually promised myself when I started working on it, it was going to be a 3-month project. I was only going to spend 3 months on it. And obviously that didn't happen. It was like 6 months. But still, that's a good turnaround for like a 3-month expectation and a 6-month turnaround. I really wanted to focus as well on my strengths as a developer. My background as a developer is in art and design, and I've spent a lot of time working on other games and other creative projects in art and design. And so I wanted to make sure that a game like this that I worked on would really feature my strengths and not my weaknesses. So, I wasn't focusing on technical programming or pushing the engine to do things that it isn't made to do. Like, I've got plenty of friends that do that, and it's very cool, and I could not. I really wanted to focus on the art and the design and also the pieces of artwork that I'd be featuring. I chose to use pre-existing artwork because of budget constraints. All of the artwork that I picked in this game is copyright free because it's just so old. And so this meant that it could free up time from my schedule rather than spending weeks or months making all of the art for the game. I could really focus on fine-tuning the design, the UI, the UX, adding in fun little touches, and figuring out the technical problems that I don't really have the expertise to, do well, but I did decently, I think.
The first game I was working on, the Australiana survival game, is still brewing in the back of my mind. Every indie developer has the passion project, the one idea that made them want to make games in the first place. And I think that's my one game. One day I'll come back to it when I have the time, the skills, the contacts, and the money to do it right.